all of that was spun from me discovering that essay at the beginning of my career and understanding that this whole thing of content marketing isn't just like problem solution content. It's about how do I build an audience? How do I like get people's attention? How do I think, I remember even thinking about like search in this way of like, it's not someone goes to search. Search is just the same thing as them turning on the TV. It's what they're paying attention to. Like, and if you, in the whole like what Google wants mentality, the reason that that's such a fallacy is what Google wants is what your customer wants. And if you just focus on what your customer wants, you two birds, one stone, like,
yes. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, you kind of really got me riled up here.
Welcome back to Content That Grows podcast. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Ronnie Higgins. He's the director of content at OpenPhone and has worked for prominent brands such as Hopin, Udemy, and Eventbrite. He brings nearly 2 decades of experience in marketing and content, which includes in-house leadership roles and advising and consulting. Ronnie, thanks so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig in. You have a lot of experience. We're going to kind of talk about just how the world of B2B content marketing, all of that is evolving. And so, just jumping right in, I know when you kind of first proposed a topic for our discussion, you started with kind of like this, it's the end of B2B content marketing as we know it, ... and I feel fine. So maybe you kind of just start there and elaborate on that.
Yeah, so to understand the context of this is to understand that like when I first started in content marketing, when it first started to become a thing, Marketo was like championing it, HubSpot was championing it. There was this like playbook, and that playbook worked like gangbusters when you were a first mover. It was like it was proving that it was like content marketing was the new marketing because people were using Google to find solutions, and it wasn't just like, oh, I need to make sure that my website and descriptions of my product or service were search optimized. I needed to publish content that proved that I understood the problems that my customer had. And to like, the way I describe it is like, and it was literally like, I remember this like a vivid story of publishing something on a Tuesday afternoon and seeing it ranked top of search results on Wednesday morning. Like it was that easy. And even then there were no SEO tools. Like no one was like using ClearScope, or no one was like, even if there were some of the tools like Ahrefs and stuff, like they were very like basic back then. And there was like, all of that worked. And then immediately what happened was everyone started to come in and start copying everybody. This was like the copycat crisis that Ryan Law has like talked about or coined. And, that was fine. It was competing. Like that kind of happens with products too. And then fast forward to today, like we're still relying on that same playbook that's like a decade old. Yet new platforms have emerged. We are, privacy is now like such a huge thing. Like, I remember Facebook back then, I could say, all right, let me look at all of the people on my page and what do they like? And I can get like so much data out of Facebook back then, and they locked that stuff up about 4 or 5 years ago. And so there's that. Then there's like back to the privacy. A lot of people don't know that your SEO tools are based on clickstream data. And if you have people who have ad blockers and stuff like that, it's starting to like make that data less and less reliable. So that you might punch something in that your customers are searching for, but it shows 0 search volume on like Ahrefs or SEMrush. And so like there's that. There's people who are not all like homogenized onto like 4 or 5 platforms. They're now spread across the internet. They're decentralized.
Yep.
And all of those platforms that used to send troves of traffic now want you to pay a premium for it. Yet everybody is still doing the same thing. Maybe they've like launched a podcast or they're doing some video series, but they're not really like trying to do anything different there. They're just doing whatever it is a competitor's done or what they've seen other marketers do. And so I'm watching the stagnation of B2B content marketing at the run in parallel with content marketers who have been recently laid off or just jumping ship or just up and coming people, instead of becoming content marketers, just going the creator route. Yeah. And they are building audiences, like just really trusted audiences, and they're charging brands premium to access it. The same way Facebook and Google and LinkedIn charge a premium. And so I feel like if B2B content marketing does not address these like elephants in the room, like I don't think I'm gonna have a job like in the future. Like even me, like I think there's just not gonna be much of content marketing in the future other than like executives saying like, oh, we need SEO and doing some like product aware, problem aware stuff. And but content is much more than that. Yep. And that's why I feel fine, because I feel like something's going to give, and eventually there's going to be a movement towards that, but when, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So let's unpack that a little bit. One of the things you mentioned, whether or not it was good, sort of this like golden era of, you mentioned like the all the Facebook audience data and like who's on your page, all that stuff. That was still the same era as like you actually saw actual search terms in Google Analytics, things like that. So like the amount of data became just ballooned to such a level that you could get granular insights, you could do all kinds of stuff. And then it's sort of been on that like decline, and I think kind of declining precipitously now with like you said, sort of the cookie policies and clickstream data and a lot of that stuff. I recently posted along those same lines that like I think the most painful part of that aspect of what you're talking about is going to be the fact that the majority people who are now founders, CEOs, C-level people, VPs of marketing are at a point in their career where like this is all they've known was the quote unquote golden era. And that's what's causing a lot of the challenges around like, well, but why would we invest in it if we don't know it's going to work, or, some of those areas that I think are challenging. So, I totally agree. Like the evolution and how it's kind of moved, from, wide open spaces from early days of HubSpot and kind of like the initial, blogging for business concept. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there, because like even to me, content, like a lot of people still think of B2B content, the default is still blogs. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think that in the last few years we've really branched out to much more back into a lot of podcasts, video, like much more unique social stuff, episodic content, like a lot of different things. So do you think all of that, like, are you saying kind of like you think all of that is going to die eventually because of the rise in like the creator side, or is it more of just like the connection of investing in content marketing for B2B because you historically could see a clear ROI, but now it's harder? Yeah. Which do you think? Is it both? Is it one or the other?
I think so. I'm being pithy and I'm being absolutist in this, but like when I'm saying that like it's the death of B2B marketing or B2B content marketing, I'm mostly saying like it's still gonna exist, it's still gonna be a thing, but I'm trying to think of how much it is. There was I'm trying to remember how much it the so like the I'm trying to remember who wrote it. There was this article I gotta find where it actually talked about humanity generates 375 billion gigabytes of data per day, and if you think of that as like a most of that is content, even if it's just like grandma's like Facebook post,
Sure.
like all of that per day is trying to compete for the 10 hours of media like the average person consumes every day.
Right.
And if everybody's like competing against everybody, not just you and your like direct product service competitors, but like I think the realization of all of this came to me when I went to Udemy and was like, okay, so the topics that we're trying to rank for are also the topics that are at the top of search results are Harvard Business Review, Forbes, things like that. So you're going up against major publications, and then you had the rise of like the creator economy, and now you're competing for the attention of some really smart 18-year-old who just started to do a TikTok on like whatever it was your topic that you're trying to be a dominant authority on. And so I think right now like the landscape is changing, and I think that there may still be an investment in content marketing, but its dominance as the like essence of marketing, I think like we're like sort of forfeiting that power over to individual creators now.
Yeah. I think there's a lot there. So when you kind of think about it that way as creators, obviously like kind of collectively being a new platform, but obviously each of them having their own. Do you have any way that like any sort of distinction between kind of what we've traditionally understood as like influencers or like even B2B influencers versus like creators?
I've ignored the debate on influencer versus creator because there is creators who aren't influencers and there are influencers that are sort of creators. It's not a well-kept secret that a lot of influencers like in a certain space, like a niche like business influencer that reviews like products or says like this is their favorite product, they're really just getting paid to say that a lot of times. But they don't, so like that's an influencer they might create a report or have a blog and they'll say like this is my favorite software, but they're not really doing much in terms of like what is being considered now a creator. But creators have influence. I mean, I think the difference is that they are building a platform, like a media platform. They'll call themselves a media company, and I guess they are even if they have just a newsletter. But it's that essence of they are publishing content regularly. They've built a brand of content. They're a content brand, not just a personal brand. But there's too much gray area to like put a definition because I feel like whatever I say is just going to open up debate that I'm not that worried about.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to ask I think there are a lot of, because they're so close and there's some overlaps and whatnot, I wanted to ask because I think I wanted to make sure people weren't sort of dismissing it as like, oh, well, my business doesn't work with influencers or whatever, like treating it synonymously, because I do think there's a difference there. So how do you think about, I mean, just you join a new company, and they're like, well, we want to grow with content, we want to do that. Like, how do you think about building a new plan or even making a recommendation, on like this is what we should do over the next few years, in light of some of the way things are evolving? Like walk me through some of your thoughts there.
So I'm at OpenPhone right now, and OpenPhone is a business phone solution for small businesses in the United States and Canada. To make that a little bit more concrete, if you started a business today, you either use your personal phone, which is a big mistake, or you go to the Verizon store or AT&T store, get a second phone, which costs an arm and a leg, and you carry around two phones, or you download an app to your personal phone and sign up through OpenPhone and get a second phone number. And then, of course, we're geared towards teams, so then you can have all of your phone numbers for your entire organization all under one app with all the it's like a little mini CRM on the background. So you're able to kind of manage your contacts in business, and because we integrate with CRMs, you can also do that too. So I had been advising OpenPhone's founders for a while I was at Hopin, and I was trying to help them fill this role. And then when I got laid off at Hopin in July of 22, they were like, well, do you want to throw your name in the hat? And I said, sure. I know the business. I know it well. Yeah. But back then, this was when 0% interest rates were still a thing. And, the economy, while it was still shaky from COVID and the pandemic, it was starting to feel like there was a rebound. And so I went into this job thinking, things were going to kind of stay the same, and that they had a very strong SEO presence. They had done really well with content already. The team that I inherited was really doing really well, driving pretty much putting the business on the map essentially. And then, if I can curse, shit hit the fan. Everything changed around October last year. Then there was just lots of volatility through Q4, because that's always for a lot of SaaS businesses and for small businesses when things slow down. And so it wasn't until about spring this year that I started to actually think about, okay, what is the actual long-term strategy? And what I did was I let SEO continue to be the dominant part of our strategy. I would say SEO and focusing on winning and earnings in the SERPs was 70 to 80% of our content strategy. And then as I let the performance there sort of build up and measure that, monitor it, what I started to do was take the search content to a whole nother level. So I still didn't try to diversify. What I tried to do was improve the value that we were providing through the content that was targeting search, because what we were running into were writers who had become accustomed to writing something, going into ClearScope and rewriting all the other content. And I come from a film broadcasting background where everything is about the consumption experience. When you go to film school, they teach you need to have an inciting incident in the first 15 minutes. You need to have this here. You need to keep people engaged. And that's why people sit in a theater for 2 hours and don't complain. So long form content is not dead. But essentially, what I did was I started to see the writing on the wall with AI, and how it wasn't just about having clear, easy to read writing or good writing, which is a subjective term, but well written content was now effortless. And so I needed to ensure that the content had novel ideas. It had it provided just value in so many different ways. So started to build up I don't want to say a roster of subject matter experts that my team can reach out to, external, internal. Started to plan a content calendar that was months out versus just what the next 2 weeks were going to be. So we had more of a lead time, and what we've seen then is, while I still didn't diversify the content just in SEO, we've seen our competitors have, like, I don't know if you've paid attention to like all the Google algorithm updates. They've been like left and right. It kind of
Yep.
makes us old folks, nostalgic for the days of like Panda when you knew something was coming. Um,
Yeah.
but the volatility, like, we've survived it. We've not just survived it, we've thrived in the volatility of the last year, because I have worked with the team to make sure that we're not just like, here's the topic, I wrote about the topic, I got the keywords that ClearScope said, and I got the score. It's like, no, like, when you understood the search intent. Our
Yep.
briefs have this, like, what's the begin state when someone is reading this content? What's not just like, why are they searching for it, or what's their search intent, but like, how are they feeling about this? What's frustrating them?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
there's the end state where it's like, okay, they've read this thing, now what have they gained? So I've trained my team to think of our audience as the protagonist in a story who starts the story in one state and ends it in another.
Yep.
And so you can look at our competitors, and they're either teetering along, and then there's even some of them that are just dropping in terms of their organic traffic, while ours is the only one going up and to the right.
Yep.
Now, how that has, like, when I think about the looming like issues that we were just talking about of still using the old playbook, I was like, I need to start planting the seeds and championing for a shakeup of our content strategy. And so that is very recently started to be implemented. So instead of our SEO, like purely SEO focused strategy being 70 to 80% of the strategy, it is now maybe 10-20% of the strategy. Doesn't mean that SEO is not part of the rest of it. It's
Correct.
search informs, but we are also looking at social signals. We're also looking at mainly social signals. So like using SparkToro, BuzzSumo, a few other tools to sort of like gather different inputs. We're monitoring all these different subreddits, Quora, all kind of places to like build up the inputs. We're focusing on content pillars, which is an old school tactic. A lot of SEOs will say, you mean clusters? And I mean, no, that's what the SEO world calls it. But the idea of building a deeper topic authority by dedicating a chunk of your content strategy to a single topic and going deeper into it, or providing enough material to have like even if it's just like the basics, it's like the basics, a kit, a tip sheet, a field guide, things like that. In Q4, so we're in a fiscal calendar, and as of recording, it's mid-October. So our Q4 starts in November. We're going to have a live stream. We're going to call it the 411. So we're going to do a monthly series where it's like the 411 with OpenPhone, and each topic will be helping small businesses as they go into 2024. So we've been paying close attention to all the biggest problems and trends that are top of mind, and I'm gathering a panel of customers and experts and thought leaders to discuss those. So first is small businesses want to know about AI. They want to understand. They're like, I believe it will help my business, but I don't know anything. Where do I start? How do I do it? Where do I focus? Because there's just so much information. And so being able to take all of that information and whittle it down for what's important to this specific audience. On top of that, running a contributor pilot, having people who like guest post, but a little bit more sophisticated than that. So reaching out to experts who have backgrounds in customer communication, customer engagement, who have like helped major companies and helping them distill their learnings for smaller enterprises like small businesses. And then of course video, like we've looked at an analysis of YouTube to figure out where are some gaps that we can fill up there. And I'm going to start looking around for building out a sort of like YouTube strategy there. So how do we start to like build out that channel and not think so much of the blog as our platform, but how do we now play in multiple different places? Which is also to tie back to the webinar, not webinar, but the live stream. Like, so that's going to live stream to YouTube and LinkedIn.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate you going pretty deep on that and kind of walking through even just sort of how you came to OpenPhone. Totally agree. 0% interest era shift. Q4 of 22 was painful for pretty much all of SaaS. I think the important overarching takeaway that I have from what you just said is it's not like like your opening statements I think are pretty bullish, but like you didn't just pull the handbrake and like totally go a different direction. Like you just said, here's what's working. We think we can keep maintaining that, keep growing on the SEO side, but decrease the prominence and like bandwidth it takes from our team and like investment, and still keep that going, but now start to diversify, move into other content formats, other types of things, which I think is the smart way to do that. We have a lot of great examples from our clients where the richness of an overall piece of content, when you do get the SME, but then also have a podcast clip or a video clip that you can pull into that post to have much more context and robustness than just, like you said, sort of churning something out from the ClearScope data.
Yeah.
And I did want to go back. I know you mentioned sort of the copycat crisis or whatever, and I think that definitely became a bigger thing kind of in the late teens, I would say. But I truly believe it exploded with the amount of people that just became armed with Ahrefs or SEMrush and ClearScope and just like churned it out. And then it's like exploding again because now you just do that with AI. And there's a number of those, SEO Surfer and all those just sort of pull it into one and like crank it out. And it's like that's where you're really like, it's just getting worse and worse. Like everyone's been aware of this idea of copycat for many years at this point, but the tools I think are just funneling it so much more in that direction. So the other thing I wanted to comment on there, as you're shifting, you're working with leaders, you're going to do the live stream, going to invest in video, a couple of other areas. Can you just briefly touch on like how that conversation's evolving around measurement and like knowing what's working? Because obviously that, again, kind of going back to, we've had all these staples and the ROI of this and that, and so now you're talking about decreasing in trackability and some of that stuff at the same time that you're investing in new channels. So I think that'd be interesting to hear about that.
I have been fortunate enough to know and work with a lot of smart people who've armed me with the like knowledge and tools to have this conversation. I'd say starting back from the very beginning of my content career, Erica Kella, who's at Facebook now, I think she's director of content operations, all the way to Micah Hirschman and Margaret Jones at Eventbrite. And just like, long story short is the mindset of measurement that I think we were talking about that people have fallen into when there was lots of data was this like someone searches something, opens an email, visits site, fills out form, or signs up for product, and money gets printed. And as what we've learned, and I think this is something that a lot of people are finally starting to talk about, like Rand Fishkin's one of the people who started talking about it a long time ago, and now I believe we're seeing more and more people talk about it, that like the we've sort of found that like the metrics that we used to believe actually are not painting the right picture, and that like I think the analogy that, or story I think that Rand Fishkin had told that really made it click for me was this like pizza place that had handed out had gotten I don't know what they're called, but people to go hand out like coupons to people.
Yeah.
And there was this one person that had handed out the most coupons, and he was like, they were wondering, like the pizza owner was wondering what their success was, and eventually followed the guy and found out he was actually handing coupons out like almost like right outside the pizza restaurant. And so it's this idea that like marketing attribution, we're starting to learn like the way we were thinking about it is not as straightforward as it used to be. And so when I talk to people, leaders or anybody about attribution, I first want to understand like how do they understand it? Do they have that mentality that what they were told by Google Analytics or what they were told by some marketing attribution system that was set up is, you know, definitive? And if so, then under like having that conversation and like helping them see versus me tell them that it's not as straightforward as it may seem, and then being able to like go into this thing that I like describe as it's almost like astrophysics, but I won't go into that, but just think of like gravity and having people around you and in your orbit. And so I think it was Gartner found that 95% of the time the average B2B buyer is not in market for whatever it is you're selling them. And so think of a business phone. Like when it comes to a business phone, the average business does not switch their provider that often. So someone who has already got, like, who is on a competitor, is on like a multi-year contract. When I think of attribution, it's like, okay, it's not just like, okay, someone signed up and gave us money. It's like, hey, even our competitors are like just like salivating at the mouth to open up our emails. They're constantly coming to check out our content, engage with us on social media. And that engagement over time, you can start to correlate to a drop in cost per acquisition. One of the ways that I'm able to like help people better quantify that is by using the same metrics that paid and performance use, of like in paid cost per impression and cost per click. And I can do that with SERPs to say like, all right, how many people look in Search Console and say, all right, it cost us like, you know, a couple $1,000s to write that guide. Well, sure, like it seems crazy to say it costs $3,000 per click the second it's published, but after it hits like, you know, 3,000 clicks, we then have a positive, like a return on our investment. And so helping people understand that and helping people understand, so it's like using the metrics and understanding that they know, but then using all of that to then say there's value in people constantly engaging and staying top of mind, because they might not be in the market, but when someone says, hey, what do you use for your business phone? You know, they might say, oh, we use competitor, but I really like been paying attention to what this company OpenPhone's been doing. And that you can't attribute. It's impossible. It doesn't exist. Like it might come up in a sales call, but if you go and search Gong for it, cool. But at the same time, if they taught to sales, that gets attributed to sales. So it's leading this conversation and helping leaders who have been comfortable with the status quo of all the data in believing attribution models to understand that, you know, they're useful to sort of like have quick conversations and measure results and understand what's working, but they're not gospel, and that if you really want to have a sustainable business, you need to adapt and sort of like shift how you're thinking about it.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's great. Especially just starting from a place of what they understand. I think it's a really smart way to go about it. And I think there are so many things, for us, as we work with, a lot of SaaS companies, our goal, like you said, is like optimized content, or like understanding what the opportunity is, and like, yes, optimized, but like going those steps further and having like, a good point to the topic, and understanding the person who's reading it, what their pain point is, having good SME input, like all these things, to the point where it also just, I think a lot of SEO and just in general, just like the channels, like in the, mid 2010s, I think there was just a lot of like silos, it was like, oh, well, this is SEO content and it's only built to rank, and it ranks and it gets us traffic. And this is PR, and this is, events, and this is paid search, and this is paid social. And I do think that there's a lot of things that have kind of come together and blurred. And so for us, it's like, even just from an ROI standpoint, it's not how much did this post cost to create and how much revenue is it generating. It's, we can use it to build our social audience, we can build trust, we can build awareness, all these things that kind of come through. And then, like you said, I can't tell you how many times we talked to people when I was at Sprout Social who would be like, yay, I just became a customer. I was at my last job and we used whatever, Hootsuite or Buffer, or any tool. And they're like, I got a new job and I was so excited. I got to recommend and use you, and you're like, okay, well, that came in direct and, converted really fast. And you can't possibly attach all of the things that went into that ahead of time. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's just, like I said, it's that change is happening, I think, faster and faster with cookie policies and all that stuff, that I don't think the conversation is as much around like chasing these perfect multi-touch attribution models and things like that anymore. Just really kind of understanding how it works together. So real quick, I want to touch on this before we head into the final 4 questions we have to ask everybody. I guess give me a little bit of your thought on like the affordability and sustainability aspect for content teams building their own audience.
I mean, at the end of the day, the affordability, sustainability boils down to how much money, it's about the cost of acquisition and cost of retention of a customer. And if there's, even though it's like hard to attribute like the exact dollar amount down to like a single customer, I believe that if you have if your customers and are like, let's just imagine this, like you have customers who just devour your content. You've built a content brand that even your customers are just like constantly reading and engaging with. You should be able to look at, build some type of attribution that helps you delineate between customers who consume content and customers who don't, and look at the attrition rate of those. You should be able to look at, customers who came through paid channels versus like spent a year consuming your content. And there's ways to do that in building out those models to start to build like not some like very easy statement of like this generated this much money, but correlations on those things that lower the cost of acquisition. And that, people who do this, who consume your content, are they more likely to recommend you? What's their NPS score compared? Yep. So there's things that you can do. And I don't have a prescription right now because I think we're too small of a team to do a lot of those things right now. but with the right resources, those are the ideas that I would be putting in place to go and prove to a marketing leader or a CEO that this organic approach to building an own audience pays dividends. Because the other thing too is like I shared the example earlier of like a piece of content cost $2,000 to put together. Well, when you go to like refresh that piece of content in a year, it might cost $20, $100. And so but if you say you needed to go sponsor a creator, it costs you $2,000 today, and it'll cost you $2,000 in a year. It might even cost you $4,000. That's where
it's the amortization.
Mm-hmm.
The amortization of the cost, and
it's an investment. And that's why I always tell people, like, yes, your product or service is your product, but you need to treat content like a product. It's the freemium thing that people are testing out before they actually hand over their credit card.
Yep, I agree completely. That's a great place to end it for that part, and we'll shift over real quick and just want to ask you the same 4 questions we ask all of our guests. First one being, what's a recent success or learning you'd like to share?
I think a recent success for us is we finally hired a VP of marketing in spring of this year. Up until then, myself and a few of the other marketers were reporting directly to one of the founders, and she's definitely knows like a lot about marketing, but she hadn't had like all of the experience that our VP of marketing does. And since he's been here, like a lot of things are coalescing. Like we're less in silos. We're starting to be more collaborative. Cool. And I see that in the way our content is like showing up in social. So instead of our content just, our social lead just publishing like a pithy little comment link in comments, she's working with our design team to like redo some stuff. Our producers are flagging pieces of like wearing a piece of content is an opportunity for her to reshape it and put it there. And so we're just seeing a lot of like engagement. We recently grew our LinkedIn and exceeded our goals for that, all because of that collaboration and working together. And
awesome.
I think as we go into 2024, fiscal year 25 for us, like I'm excited about how that's just going to continue to grow. And that win, I think, is where that organic strategy that's already been working with SEO, we'll start to see it compound even more because we're keeping people in our orbit. And you can imagine, like, as we grow out YouTube, it's just going to, like, keep growing from there. And I feel like that's just the foundation for everything that's going to happen next year.
Yeah, awesome. For your company, what role does content play in overall strategy? I think we've kind of already touched on it a bit, but I'll let you kind of add anything you want to add there.
The simple thing is like content is the messaging. It's a lot of people think of content as like, oh, I just need to like tackle some topics and stuff like that, but it's really how you earn trust. There's a recent study that came out that I'm already forgetting who did it. It was in Tracy Wallace's recent newsletter, The Contentment, but agency just put it out, and it talked about B2B buyers. They don't trust content from software companies.
Oh yeah, that's from Nigel.
Oh yeah, Nigel. Yeah, I told him I owe him a beer because he like proved something that I've been saying. But like, you just need to think of like, what is the message that I need people to understand, like positioning stuff. But from there, content then takes your product positioning and brings it to life further out. So if you think about product awareness stages, someone who knows a lot about your product is most aware, knows about your product is product aware, doesn't know about your product is solution aware, then doesn't know about solution problem aware. And up the funnel is where you start to earn trust by helping people understand that you understand them, their problems, their situations, and you use that exchange of value as an opportunity to let them know about your product, and you don't need to sell. I mean, I think when I presented this whole strategy to OpenPhone back at the beginning of the year, I said this is not a new strategy. Like, this is like a century or more old. Like, what was it, John Deere, with the Furrow, a magazine way before the freaking post office existed. They needed a way to like reach farmers, so they created a magazine. And that magazine was not a freaking product catalog. That magazine was stories about other farmers, tips, tricks, and by the way, there were some ads for the new tractors. I mean, that's what content marketing, the role it plays at OpenPhone and anywhere else I work, is like, it'll always be that. So even if I'm somewhere building a media company, I cannot build a media company the way people are thinking of, like entertainment, fun stuff, without building that revenue engine first.
Yeah, awesome. How does your company define success for you and your team? We talked about this a little bit. It's kind of this evolving, there, but kind of how does that work today? Are you MRR or what are you at?
MRR and ARR. Our biggest goal is organic traffic. So the other like down funnel metrics are shared across multiple teams. But if there's anything that is like solely our team, is organic traffic, and then that gets split up into different things, like, are we compounding the traffic with return visitors, or is it all net new? Are they engaged? How much stuff are they consuming? Because if someone comes to the website for a minute and bounces and never comes back, that's a waste of effort. But if they come, they spend a few minutes, they read a few pages, that's 3-4 times we had to position the company. And so that's our biggest metric. But we always look at trial starts, and then did they then convert after the trial, and then what was the MRR, ARR after that.
Yeah, awesome. And then lastly, what's your least favorite marketing conversation happening in social channels right now, and why?
I've been thinking about this.
Too many?
Well, it's not too many. I think my least favorite conversation right now is probably just complaining about Twitter. I complain about it probably personally, because Twitter was like, I feel like posting on LinkedIn always feels like work, and I don't mean like effort or work. I mean, like, it still feels like, it doesn't feel like
corporate.
Yeah, it's like I'm still on the job. And I think I've like disassociated my personal life with it. And so Twitter was always this like fun, like place I could talk about pop culture and everything. And now that that's gone, I feel like a hole is left open in my life. But there's lots of people who just waste time talking about like that stuff. And it's like, I don't care. Like, it happens. I mean, I was around way before any of this stuff existed in ICQ chats and whatnot. So it's always going to evolve and be something new. But even then, like, I don't think it's like my least. I'm sure there's something there, but I think it's just like, or actually, you know what? I think my least favorite conversation right now is the whole media company thing. Because there's not enough people who are thinking about it like I do. And because I'm the only person, it's like just drowned out by like this misconception that high production value equals value, or hey, it's audio. I'm a media company, and it's like, dude, read Marshall McLuhan's The Medium is the Message, and read a book called Out on the Wire, and you'll realize like that like your podcast sucks. like you'll realize like there are weaknesses and strengths and weaknesses of different mediums, and that you need to truly understand those in the visual language of film and video to make more informed decisions about your content. Like, if you think about like before audio and video were as accessible as they are today, and everybody was jumping into blogging and words, you had the grammar Nazis who were like, oh, sentence case versus like title case. Oh, should you use the Oxford comma? Like those people who were militant about the art and craft of the written word are just checking boxes for audio video.
Man, we should have started with that.
Oh, you want to keep going on it?
Yeah.
Because it's my gears.
Yeah, we can still put a bow on it in the next couple minutes, but generally, yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think that quality of production, or just generally doing anything episodic / quote binge worthy, also seeming to classify as a media company, and I think a lot of it just seems to kind of be like a fun, new, exciting thing to approach, and it kind of reminds me of like the there, like in my marketing career, there have been tendencies, and just certain designers fare one way or the other, where it's like, are we trying to make this to do like achieve the business outcome, or are we doing this like more as sort of an art expression, and like just make this as good as possible because we want it to be good, and not like to accomplish the thing. So I get a bit of that feeling too, of like, oh, this is something I can throw myself into and really, run with it, but not necessarily thinking like from like you don't own like a P&L and have to worry about EBITDA and like report to anyone on that aspect of like, oh, I guess I could have done half as much and focused it elsewhere and accomplish the same business result. So I like that you said, it starts for you with like sort of what's that engine to generate the that. So
when I was at Hopin, so Anthony Canada, who I'm sure everybody's like seen his stuff on LinkedIn everywhere about building media companies and he gets it, like, and I can say that because he hired me at Hopin to do that. And the reason that we never got to the stage that I am talking about in terms of like a media company there was I spent the year that I was there building from scratch the revenue engine. So it was like, you need to have like that breadcrumb trail that connects back to your product and service. So the media company approach is all about, how do I maintain and keep people's attention? But eventually you need to convert that attention. So if I want to so I'm working on a personal project right now that hopefully I'll have out before the end of the year, called Marketing Under the Influence. It was originally a Hopin idea. Like, it was something I wanted to do, and it is interviewing marketers about a piece of media that has had a tremendous amount of influence on their life. And it's a narrative interview, so it's not like this where my questions will be in there. It's them plus me telling the like narrative glue, like adding the narrative glue. And like one of the stories about a woman who grew up as the like only Asian kid in rural Virginia who's like struggling to like belong, who goes to a summer camp where they show Star Wars. And she's like, yeah, Star Wars was awesome, but it was watching 300 kids go from strangers to best pals while watching a movie. I started to realize pop culture is how I make friends, how I build friendships and relationships and stuff like that. And I got a few other interviews recorded. Now I'm going to be working on getting a sponsor once I have those episodes like buttoned up. But if I were to be doing that within a B2B context, like in-house, I would need to have some way to eventually get the people who are paying attention to that to experience the product, to become a customer. And the reason it was in Hopin thing was we were going to be putting it out. We were going to be doing it through Hopin and using the product. We were then going to show behind the scenes of how we were using like the product to do it. using
Yep.
StreamYard to record the podcasts and everything. So there were lots of like product tie-ins. So you just need to be thinking that, and it's one of the reasons I think the media company conversation like bothers me a lot is like I'll see people doing some really cool creative stuff, but then I'm like yeah, it's got your name on it, but
Yep.
I don't get what you want me to do next.
Right. Yeah. Or even attracting the right people.
Oh God, yeah,
That,
yeah.
yeah, that even gets to that. So yeah, which I think, I mentioned before about like turning things to art. I think like the phrase I couldn't come up with at the time is like passion project. It's like this is a perfect example of like you're not trying to shoehorn this into what you're doing at OpenPhone and somehow make it work because you want to do it. It's a passion project and you're just going to do it on the site because you're passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I totally agree. There's a very, very big line between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a lot to learn, I think. A lot of people, too, don't even know the origin of content as king. And when I tell them, they're like, what? Like, not the first person to say it, but Bill Gates wrote the essay in 96. And I feel like anybody who did read it didn't finish reading the first sentence, which says, content is where I expect most of the real money to be made on the internet, much like in broadcasting today. And if you understand, if you have a comms degree or if you know anything about mass communication, you understand that we went from a handful of television stations to hundreds. And when we went from a handful to hundreds, it opened the door for an entire network of television dedicated to black people, multiple channels dedicated to music. Like Hallmark has a freaking channel, for God's sake. Like,
right. Yeah.
And if you think of the internet creating infinite power laws, like we talk a lot about the internet creating bubbles. And we talk about how like, oh, like all the like, bigots, they're all on like their, in an echo chamber spewing hate. There's also a good side to that where and this is where why I'm doing that personal project is I have multiple of these, like, so I'm only going to do like limited series to prove out, but I want to build a entertainment network for marketers. And I believe that there's like a market for that now because marketers want to connect without having to like connect via content that's all about learning how to use AI to write titles. They don't it doesn't have to be done with their job, but there has to be some connection to marketing. And so I think, all of that was spun from me discovering that essay at the beginning of my career and understanding that this whole thing of content marketing isn't just like problem solution content. It's about how do I build an audience? How do I like get people's attention? How do I think, I remember even thinking about like search in this way of like, it's not someone goes to search. Search is just the same thing as them turning on the TV. It's what they're paying attention to. Like, and if you, in the whole like what Google wants mentality, the reason that that's such a fallacy is what Google wants is what your customer wants. And if you just focus on what your customer wants, you two birds, one stone, like.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, you kind of really got me riled up here.
Well, I do feel that I could probably go, the rest of the afternoon, getting, in and out of philosophical and tactical and practical, but I think we'll go ahead and can wrap up there. I really appreciate the time, Ronnie. It was a great time, great discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to continue it in the future.
Awesome, man. Feel free to use that part where I'm more passionate as the cold open, get people hooked in.
Right on. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
See ya.